Woohoo!
Hello, Skyler, my beautiful friend. How are you?
I'm fabulous, Holly. Thank you so much for making this time for us to sit down and have a conversation.
I
I
mean,
feel like everybody's a little starved for conversation today, and we get to have a juicy one, so I'm
and we
excited.
get to have such a juicy, you've got your coffee, I've got my iced coffee. I don't know if I told you this, Skyler, but a couple of weeks ago when I did one of these chats, I was like doing a lot of this with my hands, and I totally just sent this steel cup flying against the wall, and there was like coffee just dripping down the wall for a solid 30 minutes, So that's
Yeah.
that's meetings in the age of Zoom. It looks like
Well,
people,
it's death by gesturing. It happens all of the time. You're like accidentally Millie rocking, and you didn't even know that you were doing it, and you knocked.
Totally. It looks like people are filtering in. So hello, everybody who is joining us today. We are so glad that you're here, that you're making time for this incredibly important issue. My name is Holly Amaya, and together with my partner, Anne-Marie Hoftailing, I own a company called Story Imprinting, and Story Imprinting teaches companies the art and science of story. We have a training component where we do lots of corporate training around various professional development and storytelling topics, and we also have a communications vertical as well. My background is I worked as a journalist, I'm a lawyer, recovering, and I've been doing communication strategy for many, many years. And I came across my beautiful guest today, probably, Skyler, I don't know, maybe almost 10 years ago, I would say. Does that sound right?
I was about to really underestimate and say 6, so. Woo!
Okay, so what is time? What is time anymore? But I've known Skyler personally and professionally for many years, and I've had the incredible privilege of watching her career really take off, and I've been able to watch her evolve over the last several years into doing this incredibly important work that we're going to talk about today. So Skyler, I'm going to introduce you, but then we're going to dive in with some questions. So Skyler and I share a mutual friend and mentor in Anne-Marie, my business partner. And Skyler, when I asked her to send me her bio, she started with a quote. And the quote is, "Earning your value through self-advocacy is an act of social justice." Can I get an amen for that? I mean, yes. And this is how Skyler's mentor turned ally and colleague, Anne-Marie, sparked her veracity to self-advocate. So Skyler's own journey towards sort of earning and advocating for her value began 7 years ago when she started her own consulting business. And we're going to talk about how you have really elevated that business over the last several years. So thank you for being here today. Love seeing you. You look flawless and stunning as always. Yes. So talk to us just a little bit about your origin story. What is your background? Where did you grow up? How did you get into all of this work?
So I grew up in San Diego, Southeast San Diegan. I'm a fourth generation Southeast San Diegan, and I come from a long line of first partner in San Diego County. First fire station to integrate in the country was my granddaddy's fire station here, Station 19. First Black fire chief west of the Mississippi is my grandpa. I have often been so many places where I'm the first. I'm the first woman or the first person of color that's been asked to speak somewhere, or train somewhere, or join part of a team. And, in my house, we never talk about money at all. And the first time that I really realized how important and the real cost of avoiding it was after I was taking care of my grandmother and I tried to buy her house, and feeling the pressures of gentrification and knowing that I'll never be able to afford this house again. And as a single Black woman, I realized, who the heck did I think that I was, that I even thought that that was something attainable at that time.
How long ago was that, Skyler? How long ago was that?
That was 3 years ago. 3 years ago.
Okay.
And in that process, I just was really coming to cold grips with, I've been avoiding conversations around money my whole life. And now I just avoid them whenever I have to talk about it. Yeah. So not only am I trying to buy a house, not only was I caretaking for my grandmother and starting my business, but it's like every single conversation around every project is a conversation around what you're going to charge.
Right.
And, how much. And it had gotten to the point that I had been in some really complicated situations because I just waited and waited and waited till the very end. And then it became this horrible thing that I never wanted to confront.
Right.
And so the combination of, I want my own asset, boom. And I want property in my grandma's neighborhood. And I want to approach conversations that I've built entire systems around avoiding. And the only person and opportunity to step in that doorway was through a mentor turned friend. And she sat down with me and had to tell me a lot of things that were really hard to receive around being a Black woman and what was happening to me and what I was accepting. And the fact that I was accepting validation as currency instead of payment.
Yes.
The fact that I was—
We've got to get into that later, but yes.
Woo! So that is how I started, and I've never looked back. And from that day forward, I just felt like I could spend every single day of my life doing this, and I would never be tired of it. I would never tire of someone telling me that they sat in a room and had a conversation that they led instead of sitting at the mercy of somebody else.
Yes, I love there's so much to unpack here. We could talk for several hours, I feel like, about this and not get tired or not run out of content. Side note, for all of you who are here, we want this to be a very didactic experience. So please feel free to use the chat box. If you've not done chatting on Zoom, there is a way when you open up the box, you'll see a 2-line, and we would encourage you to have, to the extent you feel comfortable, use the little caret drop down and make sure that you click all panelists and attendees so everybody can share in the conversation. We would really appreciate that. Skyler, you're getting tons of love on the chat box. I know.
Hi, Alicia. Hi, Sherry. Tammy Hawkins. Yes, LinkedIn to real IRL. This is awesome.
I love it. So much to unpack there. I think, something that I have seen in my own work, and then just frankly in my own, and in my own trajectory through my own career is we also never talked about money. I had nobody talking to me about that. I just grew up very blue collar, and it was not anything that anybody really discussed, right? And so when I went out into the world and I had to value my services, I had no idea how to do that.
Right.
And I think, Anne-Marie, one of the things that she always talks about is when you're negotiating not only for yourself and for your own worth, but you're also doing it as this act of social justice and legacy for all the people who are coming up, after you. And so, one of the obvious questions I had for you is, where does your passion for this issue come from? I think that's really obvious to anybody who is watching this. But, I think that we're in this very specific moment in time. Right.
Yeah.
Where the volume is turned up on all of our inputs. Right. We're in a pandemic, so we're everybody's on their phone. Everybody is consuming a lot of content. Right. And also we're at this very specific time in our nation's reckoning, frankly, with the systems that have been put in place to oppress communities of color. And to keep people in a certain space. So I would love to just talk to you a little bit about, as a Black woman, why this is so important to you, and some of the lessons that you've learned through your consulting business, working with women in communities of color to help close this pay gap. Because the work that you're doing is so critical, and your voice is so unique and special. And I just would love for everybody who's here to hear a little bit about how that path has been for you.
So, first of all, let's just roll up our sleeves. I just feel, even in the asking of the question, it just makes me feel emotional, because I truly do feel like this is my devotion. This is my devotion. And, the first time I negotiated with an agent, I found my own agent online. So I wanted to do some modeling, and I really like hosting and emceeing. And so I got booked for this International Fashion Film Festival that takes place in La Jolla. And the interesting thing about it is that, it's San Diego, we got to get a lot of slack because we're a big city with a huge budget, and yet we still have this kind of understanding that we're looked over compared to San Francisco and Los Angeles. So we have this big international film festival. We have Badgley Mischka, Armani is there, president of 20th Century Fox China, president of E! Entertainment, all these big people. Now ask me if you can find a plate of food in that whole venue. That's a different story. So that's what I mean. A little high class, a little nothing. Okay. Little nice mediation. So my agent said, Skyler, we really want you to host this show. There's about 1,000 people coming. And I'm the only person who's not only not white, I'm the only person who's over 110 pounds who's going to be speaking on stage. So I tell her, what's the pay for the show? And she says $500. Now, the average American doesn't have $400 to fix a transmission. So let me not even pretend that $500 isn't a lot of money. Right. Okay. I was thinking of just the chunk, but when Anne-Marie asked me to really evaluate what I'm getting for that, how many hours am I putting in? Oh, I'm also paying for my own wardrobe. I'm also doing this. I'm also doing that. So I realized I can't do it for any less than $2,000. And so she held up a whiteboard literally while I was on the phone and wrote the script. And she's like,
I can see this. I can see you doing this, like the shut up, close your mouth. Right.
Because that desire to just tap dance all over the place and fill the void of my own discomfort instead of just sitting there.
Yeah.
Because I have nothing to be afraid of. I don't need to shirk back. I don't need to make it more comfortable. I can sit there with my head held high and my back straight and look at someone in the eye and wait for them to have a response. And that is not something that I have ever been taught to do. Right. That is not something that we internally in our culture, we even talk about, like, when you talk about culture, it's like there's so many different types. The culture of the state of California, culture in your own home, culture in your own communities, the messages that you receive. Some of them, for me, put your head down and work harder. You should be grateful for what you have.
Always. Yeah, I'm just grateful to have a job. I don't want to rock the boat. Do you hear that a lot?
Oh, yeah. I already make a lot of money.
Right.
But does that mean you're getting paid fairly?
And side note, I would just say, I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but I know that for a lot of, like, I've dealt with this before where I'm like, well, this is like more than like my parents ever made, right? Like, or I have this whole idea of generationally, like there's almost like a shame attached. Right. And this is all coming from me. This is not coming from my family. This is just coming from me of like having achieved a certain level of success and feeling like, oh no, I'm not entitled to any more of that. I can't rock the boat. Right? Does that come up in your work with clients?
Oh yeah, and we often say that. So actually, to perfect segue into the trajectory of how we got into this, and then all of the fears and the myths that come up. Anne-Marie and I just sat down after that one call, and I said, we have to teach this to as many Black women as possible, because afterwards I just felt this, like the tables of power had gone from this to balance. And by the end of the call, she was explaining to me why the job was worth more money and exactly why they wanted me. And I was like, what the heck? This has been an option this whole time. I didn't even know this was an option. And from that day forward, so we have led three training sessions in 2 hours. We have gotten 150 people to self-advocate, earning over $500,000 in salary increases, over $275,000 in certifications and tuition reimbursement, simply from telling someone that they can have a conversation around just arriving at what's fair with their employer. That's all that it is.
So talk to me about these sessions. Like the first one that you did, like how did you promote this? Like what communities were you sort of looking at and targeting, and set the scene for us? Like when you walked into whatever venue, this was back when you could walk into venues with people, right? So when you walk into whatever venue, like what does that audience facing you look like? Because I think this is a skill that needs to filter like all levels of the workforce. So talk to me about that.
What I see, and from the survey results, because we are metric driven folk, okay? It is not like this is a nice thing to do. No, if you invest in yourself in an hour and a half to 2 hours, we will help you deconstruct all of the messages that you've internalized around what your value is and what you can and cannot ask for. And I was blown away to walk into a room, and our goal each time has been to double the audience size. And thus far we've been able to. So each time I look across the room, and we have people with Juris Doctorates, and some people, the highest level of education is high school diploma. We have some people, the oldest person we've had thus far in our class is in their late 70s. We have some people who are the very first year of college. And I told my, for friends that have babies, I said, bring your babies, because they need to hear this conversation even happening in the ether. So what happens is, this is kind of funny, but for us not being necessarily a spiritual unit, it feels like going to church, because everyone who sits there it has this resonance, and they all cry, and they think
like
about
a conviction.
Yes.
Yeah.
The collective amount of money you leave on the table. And after you negotiate one time and you advocate one time, you start to really grieve all of the times that you didn't. You start to really think about all of the times when you didn't show up in integrity for your own back. And then you start to whip your own back with it. That's what we see. And so what we are reminding, and I was reminded, this is a human issue. This is why Olympic athletes are doing it, why Michelle Williams isn't doing it, why Academy Award winning actresses aren't doing it. It's happening all across the board. It's why a lot of, executive C-level partners at firms and corporations they're at the top level, but they're making 70% of what their colleagues are making. Yeah. So it's hard for everyone. And the reasons it's hard are unique to each one of us. And yet it's a very human feeling.
How do you meet I hear this a lot, and I'm curious how you meet this. People will say, like, well, there's this inherent imbalance in power, right? Like, I'm just me. I'm working as, kind of a mid-level employee at this huge corporate behemoth. Like, what business do I have? Asking them, like, they're just going to give me a lockstep raise, or I'm in a salary band and they're never going to go above that. Like, how do you meet that kind of, you don't have to like give us all the secret sauce, but I'm just curious, like, how do you get your clients to sort of shift their mindset and move into this place where asking is okay?
Yeah. What I ask them is, okay, so, and I've had some where, and I kid you not, some people, when they're afraid, they'll be emotional, and some, when they're afraid, they may be argumentative or upset and say, listen, this is not going to work. And what I say, and what I was encouraged to say is, from Anne-Marie, is, okay, then I believe you. If you are telling me that you have no power, you're giving it away, you're signing it away, and I don't care that is a self-abandoning in that moment. And what we're saying is, okay, but have you tried it like this? Did you do it like this? Let's try one more time in a conversation that you're leading, in a conversation where you're prepared, not just with numbers to what to ask for, but also the terms of what you're negotiating for. Were you prepared also with a full detailed report of the contribution that you give to organization? Were you prepared with the actual language that's written in your job description and the metrics that you are being measured against? Did you use that? And here's the thing that we also have to say is that organizations and companies have to design a system. Like, they have to design a system, right?
Right.
But systems are flawed. Just like, how many of us are hitting forget password every single other day, and then it says, hey, don't use your past password. It's like, the system error, malfunction.
Guilty, yes.
It's right there. We have human beings, flawed people making flawed systems. And so it's not the same rule across the board for every single person. It is not. It is not.
So, when we were prepping for this call, you said something to me that really stuck out to me. And this is a quote. You have this mantra of no money, no freedom, right? Which I would also say more money, more freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that. Like, I think that's really powerful when you sort of equate, being able to make this ask to having more control and agency over the life that you want to create. So tell me a little bit about that and what that means to you and how you incorporate that in your work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, the first thing is that when you step back and start to really pull a report of all of your contributions, it's kind of like a high level overview. You're not so close to it anymore. And you start to really take full stock and hearing like, oh wait, I did do that actually. Mm-hmm. And then maybe this did save my company, but how much money, right? So, having the ability to see your full self and your full contributions and not shrink or not approach a conversation around your own equity and leaving it to someone else to do it for you.
Right.
Which is the system we're trained to do. We're taught year review, 2%, year review, 3%.
Right.
But if the way that we do one thing is the way we do everything, and we know in our world that not everything is fair, So how does that make sense that then in that system that it would be the same for every single person all of the time? And so, you know, when I was invited to make decisions, not the ones that protected my company, not the ones where I was centering every single other component other than what is fair financially between myself and my employer, myself and my partner, myself and my organization, myself and my friends. Mm-hmm. Having those conversations is the biggest gift that I never wanted. And it's something that having an empowered conversation and being willing to also put your own skin in the game by saying, no, I see myself this way. I don't need you to come first. I can approach this.
Right.
And, you know, there's a lot of hurdles about bureaucracy and politics, and, you know, I don't want to skip ahead and I don't want to do all of those things. And it really does promote and also, you know, creates and reinforces a culture in your organization and in our world where, you know, we could just stay quiet. Mm-hmm. Salaries, we don't know what the other person makes. We'll just keep not talking about it. We'll keep avoiding it. And for any person who's on this call that's ever done that, I just ask you, how did that make you feel in retrospect? Because I've never regretted the times I did not advocate for myself, but I always regretted the times I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
And so how would that feel for them? That's how we start that.
I just feel like I could take this conversation in so many directions. I love talking to you about this. So I will say, you know, getting back to your work with communities of people of color, you know, a lot of companies are like, we have a diversity initiative, you know, chief diversity officer. We have somebody, you know, we have a that does this training. And I mean, it seems to me that the work that you're doing lies squarely within those bounds. And yet, you know, companies have to, it's tough, right? Because companies are not necessarily going to go out and train their people to negotiate, right? I mean, they should, but that can't necessarily be in their business interest. Like, how do we bridge that? You know, and I don't know if we're going to solve this problem on this call today, but I definitely think there's this aspect of, you know, individuals have to know how to demand their work. And also, companies have to also have some skin in the game to empower their people, because what we know is that if you are negotiating for yourself, you're better at negotiating for others as well, right? And I just feel like this is a critical gap. I'm just curious to hear like your thoughts on all of that rambling.
No, can you repeat the question really quick?
So it was sort of a malformed question.
No, it was juicy and I loved it. I'm just asking for seconds.
Yeah, no, totally. I'll give you seconds. Here's a second course. You know, how do we bridge this gap of individuals absolutely need to know how to do this, but also companies, many of whom now are making this sort of renewed commitment to diversity, or they're making a new commitment to diversity or whatever. They're making a lot of statements about diversity. To me, this is a crucial part. Do you agree with that? I guess number one. And then how do we encourage corporate America to get on board with this idea that training women and people of color to demand their worth and to negotiate for more is an important part of just making that person a more successful human and professional? And we've got some chat going on.
Yes, I see Carrie Sawyer, who is the previous head of D&I and supporting Qualcomm, is on there, and she does amazing equity work across San Diego too. And I see her, she's like, they don't understand, they do better when you have more diversity, and that is true. The research has been proven time and time again. The more diverse your board is, the more diverse. So diversity is one thing, but equity and inclusion is totally different. Yeah. It's not just one thing that an organization is writing a culturally competent press release.
Right.
What I am concerned about is, have you done a salary audit to see what your employees of color are making, what your Black employees are making, what your female employees are making, what your differently abled employees are making? Let's just take a full salary audit, because also what I want to see action. I do not, let me just cap myself. I hear and I respect the written form, and I think it's important for an organization to declare what it tolerates and what it does not publicly.
Yes.
And what is most important are the actual actions. So it's not just that you're going to have a D&I initiative and then you're going to ask the only person of color in your office to initiate it, and then you have no budget that you're investing in it.
Right. There's never a budget. They're like, can you do this for free? I'm sure you can do this stuff for free, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
No.
And truthfully, you know, it is a two-part conversation. And that's also what I love so much about the self-advocacy piece, is because regardless of where your organization is, this is a conversation about where you are and about where you want to be and about what you need to say and how you need to say it so that it's best received. And we analyze all of that. You know, the most important thing, and quite truthfully, what I would say to senior leaders who are committed, and they now understand that we have a history. Like, it does not serve us at all to not know our own nation's history. Right. And if you are a true patriot, you love our country, then you show up and you learn all about it. And what we see and what we understand is we're talking about decisions that have been made 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that are now impacting multiple generations later. And so what we are asking from allies in organizations, allies as individuals, because also when you change yourself and bring yourself into work, you use your voice much differently. And on that note, I want to transition into what allyship really looks like for the individuals.
Give it to us.
So, and I want to talk to the people on this call who have possibly been on the receiving end of this and have possibly been the requester. So I get a phone call from this amazing woman who I did a training for this large organization, this big software platform. And, you know, I've done 3 different events with them. And, you know, sometimes we talk once a year, just kind of catch up. But I got this call out of nowhere. And so sometimes you just kind of get this feeling like someone's calling me because they need something.
You always know.
What is it? What is it? So she talks to me about witnessing and seeing racism happen after they hire the first senior level person of color in their organization. Okay. Voted one of the top 10 places to work. But there are, so is it the best? That's what I have to say. Is it the best? And is it the best then when she sees this, and then when this woman leaves the room, everyone is talking about it and they're saying all these like microaggressive things. So what is microaggression? Let me stick a pin in that. Yeah. Not all violence is blatant. It can say something like what people say to me, well, you talk so nicely for a Black woman. Or, you know, you're so eloquent, as if I'm not supposed to be.
Right.
So, oh, I went off on a tangent, girl.
That's okay. That's okay. Death by paper cuts.
Death by paper cuts.
Everyone, yes, that's what that sounds like. Yeah.
And so in that conversation, what she said to me, you know, she said, would you be able to help me with that? So immediately I was like, I got to talk to Emery about this because I don't know. Like, I don't know. So she says to me, I sure hope you charge for all that coaching. Yeah. I didn't even think that that was something, like, how does one charge for a conversation in which your lived experience is coaching someone else into their own evolution to be a better leader?
Right, which side note has to be happening all the time for Black men and women across this country at this particular moment. It has to be.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so what I said to her, and for anyone on this call who has ever been in this situation, this is what I said to her. I said, I appreciate and I truly do respect that you not only desire to have this conversation, but you're willing to do it with action. And I know I'm the person that can lead you there, and I need to do it in the most equitable way possible. And she said,
write this down, everybody.
Yeah. She said, dang it, I regret that I didn't even come in that way at all. That was a learning opportunity for both of us. And I didn't tell her, I didn't even think about charging you, because I'm thinking that's my role. It's my responsibility. Like, I have to also build the world I want to see. And we also have to think about the cost of all of those things, and that there's a real value to that. There is a value to this evolution of thinking. There's a value to have an organization where you have fewer lawsuits, less liability, less people clocking out, calling out, breaking things, violating policy, all of that because they're disengaged, because they're not there. They don't feel like there's room for them there. And so, you know, what I implore every person to do always, we're all thinking about how we can just show up really like rooted in who we want to be as human beings.
Yeah.
And for the kids that come behind us that look like us, and for the people who came before that never had the kind of room that we have to say the things that we can say today. We do this in honor and in support and preparation for those amazing human beings. And for all of you out there that are trying to educate yourself, I implore you to also think about strategically investing in
Oh my gosh.
stations for much more. And
I lost you for a second, but you're back.
Okay.
Strategically investing. That's what you're saying.
Okay. With organizations that have been having this conversation much better and for much longer, you know, than some of us have. And so just really being, and also there are a lot of organizations that can, being very scrupulous and thoughtful about where you are also investing your dollars, your time, etc. So what I would say to you is to listen and also to use your position of not just we should hire another person, but also maybe it looks like you tell them how much you're making and what they should shoot for so that they're not missing the mark, which is something that the incredible Deanne Steele shared that story so many times. I know she's on the call. I just had to shout out Deanne. San Diego Magazine, she said someone slid their pay stub over to me and I was way off the mark. That's what allyship looks like. That's what it is. And so allyship looks like a friend of mine, and this is where I'm gonna cry. Allyship looks like a friend of mine who says, I took 10 years of my life to learn this, and I'm gonna teach you, and I want you to go make money, and I want you to help other people make money. That's a much different thing than I'm posting your photo on our Instagram page and saying that I support you. It's sharing and taking your stake of over-resource, your stake of leadership, your little piece, and you're bringing so many people with you and saying, wait, listen here, look here. And not just look here, but pay this.
Right.
Because that's the market value, not what you think the value is.
Yes, that is such an important point. Like, I think there's a tendency to be very performative. Like I'm an ally, look, you know, I'm posting this picture, whatever that might look like. But, you know, I think where we are going to, as a society, start to close this very well documented pay gap, which by the way is only getting bigger because of COVID, which we want to talk about in a minute. You know, I think that's just really crucial, like for everybody who's on this call to recognize if you are in a position to elevate a woman, a person of color in your organization, do that by talking to them about the market value for their job, what we're making, what other people are making. I mean, why is there this big secret around this? And again, I say this as someone who I used to never talk about what I made because it was not polite, right? Or I was afraid that stuff like salary police were going to come arrest me or something, right? Like if I gave voice to it. And the result of that is that over the years, I have got so much money on the table. When I was in I did not negotiate my salary. This was 10 years ago. Why did I mean, I would have so benefited from a mentor like you or Anne Marie at that time, you know, and I think that's why this work is so critically important. You know, I think as women in particular, we need to be a lot less shy about talking about that. I know with, you know, I do part of our business is public relations. I have a dear friend who in town who is a competitor who I refer a ton of business to and vice versa. And we talk about the value of our services and what we would charge for all the time. I feel no ego or sense of competition about that because I want her to succeed because that helps me succeed. Right. And that helps both of us rise up. Right. And so,
and it creates the equitable world that we are fighting for. It's not like it is the most powerful thing what I can see happen in a matter of 2 hours. That someone can say in a survey, I unlearned, because one of the questions is, what did you unlearn? And people say, I unlearned that my circumstances that I was born into are as far as I'm able to go.
Oh my gosh.
I unlearned that with a high school diploma, that I still have market value.
Yep.
It's absolutely unbelievable. And that's what this does. So I just have to say it, because over the next year, we have some like really big goals around this. And I want to talk about an opportunity for what all allies can do. So we were able to get 150 people, 500,000.
Okay.
Now, this year, 500 leaders, $5 million, over 5 equal paydays. The first equal payday is August 13th. It's next week. Black Women's Equal Payday. Everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome. It is in celebration and honoring of Black Women's Payday. It is a lot of the content and the languaging in terms of examples may be very contextualized, and yet I guarantee you're still going to be getting the same exact, walking away with like, oh, okay, I'm armed with the language. I'm armed with the strategy. I'm prepared. And so I have all, which I know that we're going to send all of that information. I have that. And we have a pay where you are model. So everyone deserves to have this information, and you pay where you are. It's based off of an honor system. My separate ask is that for all of the allies here, allies that are here for equal pay, I have registered a GoFundMe account to sponsor 500 leaders to learn this life-saving and crucial skill. For anyone who is interested in helping me fundraise, or in just even sharing and inviting 3 women, you can't afford to sponsor them, that's fine. Calling them personally on the phone and telling them how important this is, that they get their butt in the seat. Mm-hmm. That is juicy ally work too, and I love it. So we're talking about allyship, especially in the time of Corona, and that is one such example of what they can do right now.
I love it. It's so good. And I mean, everybody who is here, you will get all of this information. You will get a link to the GoFundMe. You will get a link to outlining all of these sessions. But this is an example of moving an idea into action. That's exactly what you were doing with these sessions. We got to get you some press around that, by the way, my friend. We need to talk about that separately. Let's get you.
Yeah, I want Monique on here. So I want Monique so bad because of all of the work she's been doing advocating for her Netflix stuff that we talk about.
Let's do it. So I want to like just take a quick diversity. So I just mentioned COVID, and I've been reading some articles as I doom scroll at night before I go to bed on my phone, which I really need to stop doing. If anybody's here and finds themselves also doom scrolling with the news feeds, like, can I get a hallelujah? I do it constantly. Wean myself off the news feed. But there's all of these pieces that are coming out talking about just how women in particular are getting set back because of the pandemic. Kids aren't in school, childcare is closed. I have a friend who's a plaintiff's attorney here in town who's phenomenal. Alreen Hayquist is her name. I just have to pump her up because she does really great work on behalf of employees and consumers. And she is representing a Black woman who is a single mother of 4 who was fired from her job during the pandemic because she was working from home and trying to manage, 4 children. And like you hear these stories, you're just like, oh my God, like it's just so. And so I'm curious if you're seeing this kind of come up with some of the work that you're doing, and how, I think there's a couple of pieces to this. Like there is just the reality of that women are getting saddled with all of this other stuff, these responsibilities. But also I've heard a couple people, colleagues recently say things like, well, I'm afraid to ask for more because it's kind of that attitude everybody had in the recession in 08, 09. Well, I'm just lucky to have a job. So how do you rise to meet that, Skyler?
Yeah, that's such a phenomenal question. It's so important. And I would say the 2 things that I'm seeing the most are the following. The first being that all these organizations want to have D&I initiatives, or they want D&I training, and they have very little resources in order to fund it. And so they're asking teammates and employees to do it without real investment and without a real showing of value in doing that work. And the other is that, you know, COVID is such a, let's just call it for what it is. This is absolute, utter insanity. This is insanity, okay? And so I completely understand. And even before COVID, it's like, you know, if your company is doing massive layoffs, you know, or there's a lot of organizational change and you don't know what's happening, maybe right now even you're serving in an interim position because they don't have the budget for it. So what I would say to you is, while you're right, budgets are shrinking and some businesses are really concerned how they're even going to stay afloat. And unless you were like the CEO and the CFO managing the accounting, you don't also need to take on that job of worrying how your organization is going to pay for your pay. So think about that. And we're focusing on, and what, you know, Hoff, we call Anne-Marie Hofftown, she goes by the Hoff short, and she says, you know, it's an unemotional, fact-driven dialogue, a very emotional thought process, but we deliver it unemotionally because emotions aren't facts. We're talking about data. So if the data shows that now you're doing not just your work, but your teammates' work that's now been laid off, or you're doing and serving a role that's in the interim position and you're doing all of the things, except you don't have the title and you don't have the pay.
Right.
I am here to tell you that deserves a conversation.
Yeah.
That is warranting a conversation. And again, if they can't afford it, then that's okay. They can say no. They can say no. But we don't know until we don't know.
Right.
And maybe they can't, maybe it's just no for right now. Maybe it's all of a sudden you can take that conversation and turn it into a real transparent one about a promotion path.
Right.
Maybe you will one day turn them into a consulting client and you're doing some of that work in that capacity. Even, you know, and I want to reference also a client of mine who was a contractor and who was told she'd be brought on full time, and then they changed their mind. And so we went in 4 different times, and sometimes people think, I only want to have this conversation one time, I only want to go in 4. And
it sounds like painful.
I know. I'm like, I only start with 1 conversation at a time, so I'm freaking anybody out. But, you know, we turned a hard no. There's no full-time position. There's no we don't have the budget into her first consulting client. Right. So it's reduced income, and it's still income. And it's a layoff that, well, are you willing to give me 3, 4, 5 strategic introductions to other organizations that you know are hiring? Am I able to have a severance package? Are you amenable to a severance package given that I've been at this organization this long? Like when I got laid off from my job in 2012, my dad said, they didn't give you a severance package? I'm like, that's something they do? That's something that people do, you see? But I didn't know. And if no one tells you, how do you know? So even on the way out, let's ask some questions.
Right.
If they sit you down and it's a layoff conversation, I know that can also be tricky legally from their perspective. And you can also ask a few questions about, what does that mean? Am I able to stay and apply for another job in the company and stay here? Right. There's so much room to just talk about it instead of just like, okay, they said this and that's it.
Right. And I think frequently when people do get like severance packages, you know, I've just seen this as a lawyer, they'll be like, well, I'm just going to sign it. Like, no, you can, like, everything is negotiable. Everything is, you know, and again, I think it comes down to being able to have somebody like you or somebody like Anne-Marie who can say, like, here are the questions that you need to be asking. Here's the roadmap. Mm-hmm. And I think Anne-Marie has said all the time, she says this, and it just really resonates with me, like one of the most radical things an American woman can do is to put herself first, right? And I would just, by the way, all women on this call.
Well, I invited some gentlemen. There's no gentlemen on this call.
No gentlemen, I don't think. If you're a gentleman and you're here and I've overlooked you. Oh no, we have a man named Jim here.
Jim Gilmore?
And Jim, yes. Jim, thank you for being here.
Yes.
On, you know,
in action.
I love it. And this leads into a question that I have for you, Skyler. And it kind of goes back to the allyship piece. But, you know, on a past call that I did about sort of a similar topic, related topic, we had a gentleman who piped up and said, how can I elevate women in my organization? which I loved. I was like,
that's a great question.
Edible arrangement, flower bouquet, something. Like, that is a great question. And so, you know, I think this is going to be a two-parted question, right? So if you're a man in an organization and you want to see women achieving more pay equity, and people of color, or if you're, you know, an ally, if you're a white person in an organization and you see my Black colleagues, my colleagues who are people of color or who are differently abled are making less than I am for the same work, what is one thing that you can do? Maybe you're not the CEO, you're not the CFO, you're just, you know, you're just you doing your job. How can you stand up and encourage decision makers to
Yes. Well, I think that's a multi-tiered question, because it really depends on the individual and where they are. But let's also not dismiss that allyship can be something as like simple as, you know, I noticed that when you speak in meetings that so-and-so talks over you a lot. And I just noticed that, and that's something you should be aware of.
Yes.
It can be something like, I know that they're going to hire for this position, and have you thought about going after that? Why not? And so and for those of you that are in that position, that you're able to have conversations around creating jobs and writing job descriptions and creating recs and all of that beautiful work, you know, from there, what I would say the best way is to reflect the organization's values and their strategic plan back to them.
Yeah.
And really support everyone and where they're sourcing candidates from, because one of the things that I hear is like, well, there are not that many great candidates, and like, no, not correct. You just don't know where to look.
Right.
You're not asking people. We're not being creative in how we're doing this. And so like, there's so many ways, like even Jim being on this call, taking the time to hear this conversation, and then in the application thereof of what we talk about, and even just listening, like it's these big and little ways every single day. And so it's consistently showing up and saying, hey, you know, I noticed on this call there aren't any people from LGBTQIA community. Why? Is that something that we can do? It can even be, you know, taking in one of those company surveys, and you can say, do you have any feedback? It can be, I've noticed that, and not I feel,
right,
because feelings are not facts.
That's right.
There are 20 people on this team. There is one woman. There are, like, let's stick to the facts. So it can be that as well.
Yes, I love it. Before we're kind of getting short on time, I want anybody who's here, if you've got questions for Skyler, like this is your opportunity. Like, ask the questions. And while you're thinking about that and doing that, Skyler, just go through with us one more time your plan for these EPK events, where we can find more information. Obviously, I will be sending an email out with all of your contact information, how people can get in touch with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, go.
LoredBalloon.com, L-E, not plural in French, which I've learned. So it's LoredBalloon.com. There you will see my tag at the very top, Closing the Pay Gap event series. So my goal this year is to help 500 leaders earn $5 million in salary increases cumulatively over the course of 5 equal pay days over the next year. Those equal pay days are listed also on my website. The first one being next week, which is August 13th. It will be held via Zoom. It's a 30-minute conversation where you will walk away prepared and armed with the language and strategy to have the conversation. And one thing that I just want to stick a pin in, and I didn't mention also, is that negotiating and self-advocating isn't just a conversation around money. It can also be, you need your partner to cook 3 days out of the week instead of 2. It can also be, you know, I'm not going to deal with that right now. I need you to ask daddy.
Like you're speaking. When we started, there was legitimately a small child knocking on the door. And I just,
are you serious?
Daddy, get involved.
So, you know, even things like that we don't think we can. So you can also renegotiate terms of a relationship also, which I've learned. So wherever you are in your career, there is something absolutely in this work for you. And, you know, don't even be concerned about, you know, I don't really even need this right now, because what is amazing is the cumulative impact of this work. We've done $500,000 last year. I know, even without even thinking of the 150 people, I know 3 who have now, since that first salary increase, have more now, because it's now year 2, year 3. It's the same language all the way across your career.
Right.
And so our first one is August 13th next week. You'll see all of the list of dates, but it's for Indigenous women's equal payday, Latinx women's equal payday, Asian American Pacific Islander equal payday, and then moms equal payday. So we've got 5. Help me get these 500 incredible, hardworking people, and maybe one of them is you.
Yes.
But again, it's pay where you are. I don't care if you can't pay for it. I will find some way for you to get in. I do not care about if you can or can't. I care that you get into the class. And that's why we have amazing allies that are going to help fundraise. I noticed a lot of people on my Facebook page saying, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I know just the thing. You can support us in 2 specific ways. One, in calling and reaching out to your friends who you've ever heard say, or you've heard some of those things that we talked about that people say all of the time about why they can't have a conversation or why they can't apply for that job. Or, you know, if you are hearing that, invite your friend and call them and encourage them to come and do this for themselves. Yeah. Because this is not a feel good walk away with, that was great and I feel empowered and inspired. No, you walk away prepared, and you walk away with a gift that I never wanted, but I am so grateful that I have. And it is my privilege and my passion and my devotion to bring as many people along. And I also have the first Saturday of every month donation-based office hours for people who need to be in touch with me and they can't necessarily afford $1,250 to work one-on-one. I'm always here. I'm always accessible. So there is no wall. We will figure out how to penetrate the wall.
Skyler, every time I talk to you, I just feel invigorated and empowered and full of all of your delicious light. And I so appreciate you. And this work is obviously your calling. And so it is really, I know Lola's watching and she is super proud of her grandbaby. And I just thank you for sharing your time with all of us. You guys, I'm going to put this on the Story of Printing YouTube channel. I invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you feel so inclined, because you can watch this again. You can watch some of our other content. And I will be sending out an email with all of Skyler's information, her contact information, her email, all the information on this incredible series that she's putting on. And if you have feedback about anything that you've heard today, please respond to me, respond to us. We want to hear from you. Thank you for taking this time, everyone. You could have been anywhere and you chose to be here, and that means a lot to both of us. So have a wonderful rest of your week, my dear friend. And thank you again for this transformative work you are doing. I love you, and I will see you soon.